Welcome everyone, this is Todd from Next Level Adventures, and today's video we're going to be covering something a little bit different. So for the past few videos you've been seeing me build out the back of my truck, whether it's a topper lift system or restoring the topper itself. Today we are working on the front of the truck, and we are putting on something that I never thought or actually wanted to put on my truck, a Mini-Snorkle system. Now my truck is a two-wheel drive system, two-wheel drive truck. I'm not planning on putting this any kind of off-road package on it. I'm not planning on putting 35-inch tires, and I'm sure not planning on going through streams that are 4 feet deep. So I never needed or wanted a snorkel system for my truck. But when General Motors came out with their newly redesigned midsize trucks, the Colorado and Canyon, they offered these very high-end off-road packages, and AEV was a partner with them on developing those packages. So AEV supplied the snorkel system for those two trucks, and that snorkel system that they supplied is just so beautifully integrated into the design of that truck. Everything, it looks like the snorkel and truck were designed as one. Just absolutely beautiful execution on it. And I thought, okay, maybe I can do that for this first gen Tundra. Now, I'm not a designer, I'm an engineer. So trying to make things look integrated and pretty, that's just not my thing. But it was a challenge for me just to see if I can design something that looked as well integrated as what AEV did for those midsize trucks. And so it just started off as a challenge, and I just started working on it in SolidWorks. And then it got to the point where I had so many hours in developing it that I just couldn't stop. And so that's how this project took on a life of its own. Started off as a challenge just to see if I can design something that looks really nice and integrated for these first gen Tundras, and then I just couldn't stop, and I ended up building a snorkel system for it. And that's what you guys are going to see in this video. So let me take you through the entire story. All right, so once I had the fender off, I needed to be able to scan the fender inside and out and get an idea of the space I had under the fender. And I can't justify spending $1,000 to $2,000 on a handheld scanner just to do what I'm doing here. But there are some free apps, free 3D scanning apps that you can get. I'm using an iPhone 12 Pro, and if I'm not mistaken, you need at least an iPhone 12 Pro or newer to be able to use these scanning apps. But right now I'm using my favorite scanning app is called Scanverse. And so you see me scanning the fender right now. Once all the red is gone, that means you fully scanned the entire fender and now you're ready to process that data. So these scanners are by no means one and done. Okay, so I had to go through and scan this multiple times. It works best when you cover the whole thing with masking tape, so the scanner picks it up really well. I use the 3M blue masking tape, but I don't know if it matters. Once you have the part fully scanned, then you process it. And so now, once you start processing it, it'll do something with all that data, and then you can export it as an STL file and import it into your CAD program. And so that's what I'm doing here. It's processing the data. You're seeing me scanning the fender wall itself, and then you can output it again as an STL file and send it to yourself. All right, so this is what the scans all put together look like. So this is the outside of the fender, and you can actually see the antenna of the fender. But outside of the fender, I had to scan the inside of the fender, and then I just combined the two, and then you see the inside of what the fender looks like. And then I just assembled everything. And keep in mind, when you scan it, you need to be able to measure something on all the parts, because when it imports it into SolidWorks, the part is tiny, 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 and so you need to scale it to the correct one-to-one size. So I think I can't remember what I did. Maybe I measured a certain length on the fender and just scaled it based on that. But just keep that in mind when you're importing it. So once you have all this, now you have the contours of the fender that you can work with. So if you're trying to put something on the outside of the fender and you want it to hug really nicely, at least this helps get you in the ballpark. So you can see the curvatures of the fender, and then again the spatial awareness that you have under the fender itself. So now SolidWorks, you can't really do much with STL files other than look at them. So what I have to do is design something in SolidWorks, and I'll overlay it on this mesh, and I'll just keep carving away at the SolidWorks file to get it to match the contours of, for example, of this fender. Now, not the most efficient way to do it, but I don't have the software that you need to really do it correctly. Mine is more of a brute force type way of doing it. Now, I think I had mentioned at the beginning of this video that what really got me started on designing a snorkel for this first gen Tundra was that I love the way AEV designed their snorkels for the GM Colorado Twins. I don't know what they're called, the Bison package or whatever. Those snorkels were just so well integrated into the design of the truck. It just looked like it was a factory installed option. And so that's what I wanted to try to do. This is what I started with. All right, so similar to the AEV design where they have the round circular base here, and then the snorkel part itself, and there would have been a grill here if I were to finish this. This would have bolted to my Prinsu roof rack. I was not fond of drilling holes in my A-pillar, so this would have been attached to my Prinsu roof rack. But I kept it as thin as possible because I didn't want this creating a big blind spot, and so that's why it's thinned out like that and as wide as it is. I just try to keep the volume just try to keep this thing as free-flowing as possible. And then this is what it looked like. So I just overlaid it onto a picture of a Tundra, and this is what it looked like. All right, so this is what the rooftop snorkel would have looked like if I had gone with this design. You see the base here, and there would have been a bladder system connecting it to the air horn for the OEM, out of the OEM air box. So it comes up here, bolts to the Prinsu roof rack, and there would have been grills here for the air inlet. Kept a super low profile again so that the A-pillar doesn't block your view when you're looking out the passengers, when the driver's looking out the passenger side. But what I didn't like was that I just thought, geez, there must be 5 feet of air intake tubing from the very point where air comes in all the way to the OEM air horn. And I don't know, for whatever reason, I just wasn't feeling this. And so I stopped working on this design and I went to a hood-mounted snorkel system, a Mini-Snorkle system. And that's what this looks like. Alright, so once I decided to shift gears and move away from the full-on typical snorkel, rooftop mounted snorkel, then I thought, oh, maybe I can go with a really low profile hood mounted mini snorkel. So again, a signature AAV type box here, but underneath it connects to the bladder system that connects it to the air intake system of the car. And originally this was going to draw air from the cowl area. Now, I kind of like this. There would have been a split here so that this piece moves up and down with the hood, and then there was a seal here. But unfortunately, the grill here doesn't have any openings. It's just a blank. And so there's no way to draw air from. And if I had made the air intakes on the top, probably wouldn't have been practical, because if it starts snowing, then this whole thing just gets clogged up with snow. Same with if I move air intakes to this location, snow is just going to block the air intake. So as much as I like this design, it turned out to be not too practical, but I did like this design. And so now, I have so much time in this, and because I'm so hard-headed, I just didn't want to give up. So I went with a different design, and that's what I'm going to show you next. Alright, so this is what the latest Mini-Snorkle system looks like. So I have an internal baffle system, and this portion here covers this OEM air horn. There's a drain here, so I'll show you the internal passages of this baffle, but it basically, if water comes through this Mini-Snorkle, it'll catch here instead of going into the air intake system. This is what it looks like underneath. And the basic operation of this, let me show you a sub-assembly. So these holes are somewhat strategically placed in that I try to keep water ingress out. So let me hide this and you'll see what I mean. So the tube here, the intake tube itself, sticks up a certain height, and so if water or whatever splashes through this grill, I'm just trying to minimize how much gets into the air intake itself. So water comes in through these bottom rows, it'll hit the tube itself and just drop into this portion here, which has its own drain system. So if you look straight down, water will collect in here and just drain out this housing here. So the design of this thing works by this part sealing against the outside of the fender, and then the inside baffle system will seal against the inside of the fender. So right in here, this piece to the fender will be sealed, and then this piece to the inside of the fender will be sealed. So this will be a closed system after that point. So if you look at the baffle system itself, this is what the baffle system itself looks like. So this part here will seal, there'll be a piece of weather stripping going around, and it will seal against the inside of the fender. And then this flange here will seal against the inside fender wall. Control water ingress. So on this side there's a dip down, so the whole thing dips down, so it'll be a water catchment system here that can drain out. And then if water does get to be all the way down the tube, so if water happens to make it down here, it'll hit this wall here and then drain down into the sump here. And then there's also a drainage, so if some does happen to get up and over here, there is another drainage port here, and so water will drain out here. And so if water does get through this whole system, at least I have a couple different ways of controlling it and not it getting into the intake system of the truck.
Alright, so I printed out all the 3D sections in ASA. Again, I used ASA because it's strong, it's UV resistant, and it is chemical resistant. But now it's time to glue all the sections together. And my buddy Austin helped me out with this, so thank you, Austin. He originally helped me start printing the parts out, and it turned out I needed so much printing that I ended up buying my own printer. But now I have the sections printed out and I'm ready to glue them together. And basically what you do is you take a jar, you put some of the ASA filament in there and put some acetone in there to dissolve everything, and you create this slurry, and that slurry is used to join the two pieces together. So it basically melts the two pieces together. I was using a screwdriver just to spread the slurry around on the two different parts, but it works a lot better if you just use an acid brush to spread the slurry around. But in this particular section of the video, all I'm using is a screwdriver. So use an acid brush, it makes short work of it.
All right, so this is what the inside of my Mini-Snorkle system looks like. I'm calling this a bladder for no other reason. The OEM snorkel comes out the inside of the fender, so the OEM snorkel resides in the wheel well itself. This piece covers that OEM snorkel, and this piece will get sealed to the inside fender with a piece of weather stripping in between here. And that will seal this against the inside fender. This piece has a drainage port here. So if water does somehow manage to work its way into the snorkel system, it'll collect at the bottom here and drain out through 3 holes at the bottom. This whole thing is printed in ASA, 3D printed in ASA. So that's why you see these glue lines here. This is the size that my printer can print. So that's why it's in 3 sections. This piece here will have a piece of weather stripping on it, and it will seal against the inside of the fender once I put it on. Once the fender is put on, the Mini-Snorkle itself, which is this piece, will seal against the outside of the fender. And so air will be drawn in through here, which will go in through here and into the intake system. I don't have a bottom on here right now because once I put the fender on, I'm going to mark out where I need to cut out this hole for the fender. Once I have the hole cut out, then I can glue this bottom portion on. But that's how this whole system becomes a closed system. This seals against the inside fender, the Mini-Snorkle itself seals against the outside fender, and the whole thing becomes a closed system. This seals against the inside fender also, or the inside, I don't know what this is called, fender wall. and the whole thing becomes a closed system.
This is what my ink mark looks like after I marked it on the truck. Again, I just stuck a pen through the intake of the baffle system and marked the inside of the fender. And now I'm ready to cut a hole. And so to start the hole, I'm using a cutoff saw and I'm cooling it down with a piece of with a wet rag. Once I have the hole cut, I'm just going to double check it on the truck and then cut the final shape of the hole using a jigsaw. All I'm doing here is covering the outside of the fender with tape. I'm going to put the Mini-Snorkle on top of the fender, and from the Mini-Snorkle, I'm going to mark on the tape itself where the fender hole, where the rest of the hole should be finished cut. So in a second here, you're going to see the outline of how the Mini-Snorkle is going to fit onto this fender. Once I had the outline set, I used the existing hole that I used with the cutoff saw just to start my jigsaw blade and cut out the finished hole using a jigsaw. This went a lot faster and easier than using a cutoff saw. It doesn't generate any heat either, so the fender, I don't have to worry about the paint getting burned. So jigsaw was definitely the way to go on cutting this hole out. It just came out a lot cleaner and it was a lot faster and easier. Alright, so now I'm just testing the fender again. So I cut the hole, I cut it on the small side, and I just want to see how well the hole matches up with the flange on the baffle system. And so this was an iterative process. So I started with a hole smaller than it had to be, and then I just kept making it bigger and bigger until it until it matched the flange of that baffle system. Alright, so once mock-up was done, everything fit well, I was happy with everything. Now it's time for final assembly, and so all you're seeing me do here is putting nutserts in lieu of those Toyota plastic inserts that hold the fender liner on. Those things were a pain in the butt to get off. They all broke anyway. So I'm using nutserts and an M6 screws to hold the fender liner on. That way it'll make it much easier to get the fender liner off in the future if I ever need to remove it again. But that's all I'm doing here. All right, so this is what the completed Mini-Snorkle system looks like. Everything's back together. Styling wise, styling is always a matter of personal preference. And I was originally on the fence about the way it looks, but the more and more I look at it, the more and more I like it. So that's definitely a plus. I'm not an industrial designer, I'm an engineer, so trying to make things look pretty, definitely not my strong point. But again, the more and more I look at it, the more and more I like it. So definitely a good thing there. One thing I don't like is that it does protrude out more than I had originally planned for. So it does make it more susceptible to getting knocked off if you're going through brush or whatever. Now, I did make it very easy to change out. I don't have to take the fender off or anything. There's just 2 bolts that hold the Mini-Snorkle on. So if I just want to replace it or put a different design, maybe a lower profile one on there, it's very easy for me to swap it out. But for now, I like the way it looks, and it is fully functional, so I'm going to leave it the way it is.